The Property Pod. Welcome to The Property Pod with Moneyweb. The property sector is an ever-changing sector. And in this podcast series, your host, Suren Naidu, chats to movers and shakers in the property industry.
Hello and welcome to The Property Pod, South Africa's premier property investor podcast. My name is Suren Naidu, and on this weekly Moneyweb show, we gain insider insights from leading executives, analysts, developers, and entrepreneurs in South Africa's expansive property industry. Like last week, our pods over the next few weeks are slightly different, with it being election season. We had hoped it would start at the beginning of the month, but it's going to run over the election day, as it were. Property Pod doesn't really cover politics or politicians often, but we thought let's change things up a bit and let's speak to the mayors of some of the major metros in South Africa around real estate largely. Last week we spoke to Tshwane Mayor Celius Brink. This week we wanted eThekwini Mayor Mxolisi Kahunda on the pod. Unfortunately, he wasn't available, but he's asked the city's head of real estate to speak to us, and that is Thapelo Mmusinyane, the head of real estate in the eThekwini municipality. The big cities are still where most of property development takes place and are still commercial hubs, but face pressure with increased urbanization, essentially having to cater for more people and up service delivery in the face of what's quite a lackluster SA economy over the last decade or so. Thapelo, that was a bit of a mouthful, but a very warm welcome to the Property Pod.
Thanks, Suren. Thanks for the invite. It's an honor and a privilege to be part of your podcast.
Just to kick it off, a bit of a marketing spiel, yeah? Sell your city. Why invest in eThekwini? And that's Durban and the broader region. Naturally, we're talking property-wise, but short, sharp, what would you tell to an investor of why invest in Surf City? We
are the third biggest metro in the country. Because we are a coastal city, we do have beaches, so we are a tourism-driven economy. We are also a port city. And I think from a governance point of view, we've never been qualified. I think we're one of the few municipalities in the country that have never received a qualified audit. We've always remained unqualified and probably got two clean audit, I think in 2015 and 2016. So from a financial governance point of view, we are one of the best municipalities in terms of administration. We do have our challenges, but I think more than anything else, we are an attractive city in terms of investment by virtue of our location, both from a tourist point of view and the fact that we are a port city, meaning that from a logistics point of view, we are the gate to Africa through the port of Durban. So yeah, we are a port city and a tourist city as well. We are open for investment. And yeah, I think from a governance point of view, we do have our ducks in a row. We may not be perfect, but we do have our ducks in a row from a governance point of view. Like I said, we've never received a qualified audit in the history of the metro. So we're one of the few in the country that have that kind of track record that talks to our administration and the solidness of how we manage our finances.
Thanks for that, Thapelo. It's not a political pod, so I'm not going to get into arguments about some of the politics of people's views about Durban. Obviously, it has almost a triple whammy over the last 5 years or so with not just, COVID hit that all cities faced, but you also have, the riots and the floods. So there's quite a lot to come back from. But highlight some of the major property developments taking place in eThekwini, not just the Durban central area, but, some of the big private sector property investments and the significance of some of these big real estate projects in eThekwini municipality.
We have quite a number. I think people would know Oceans Umhlanga, that happened in Umhlanga in Durban. But we also have another one of the catalytic project in Avoca, Brickworks that Investec is doing. We have West Town in Njongweni, which has been in the news for good reasons. I think there is a shopping center currently under construction there. Baldwin is coming to the party as well for residential development. As the city, we do have our own that we've actually offered to the market for expression of interest, which would be closing on the 29th of May, being Centrum, the Centrum site as you enter the CBD, close to the ICC, as well as Virginia Airport, the East Film City, again, as you enter the city that is due to start construction soon. There is Beachwood, Again, just Durban, up north, when you go into the northern Durban north, there is the Cato Ridge Dry Port, which is earmarked for logistics and warehousing in light industrial. There is the Automotive Supplier Park, which is in Doti. We also have the Durban Manere that is still at the concept stage. That's in addition to another noticeable nodes like that are already, some of them have already been underway for quite some time, like Odibe Trade Port, Sibaya, Tongad, De La Lucia residential development, as well as the Umhlanga New Town Center. So those are, I think, some of the major catalytic projects that we are currently having. Some are already started, some are almost complete, and some are at an advanced stage, and some are just due to start.
One of the items you mentioned, I didn't hear you clearly. You said Durban?
Oh, the Durban Marina and the Durban Waterfront.
Oh, okay. I know what that is. That's the project together with the Transnet there. The Centrum site has been on the cards for quite a while with the library project. I know from my Mercury days at Mercury newspaper in Durban, that was talked about over a decade ago. Is that quite significant? Because that's quite an important site as you enter the city near Vukile's workshop shopping center and obviously the ICC there. What are you looking to come in there?
We've actually took out an expression of interest, inviting private sector players to submit their bids in terms of what they could possibly develop. We're still earmarking it for a civic precinct, and we then want to partner with the private sector. So they're talking of 10 years. Yes, it was, I think, talked about for a very long time, but I think the time for talking is now done. Hence, we published that in February, March. We took it out together with the Virginia Airport as well. It's part of those. But by implication, we're one of the largest property owners within our municipal jurisdiction. eThekwini's is a C2 of about 561,000 properties. The municipality in its own owns about 54,900. So we are also then coming to the party in terms of using our own properties to facilitate some of these developments. You would have seen that, I think, late last year, we did advertise properties on the promenade, including the hotels, as well as some of the properties on the promenade. So we do then, from our side as well as the city, do release our properties to try and facilitate developments within our municipality as well.
Since I'm getting the head of real estate who has a lot more insight than, the mayoral duties, as it were, I won't ask you about the Ilangeni one because we just reported about it, and obviously the tender still needs to be confirmed what's going to happen there. But just out of insight, I know a lot of investment has gone into the point, but that has gone relatively quiet. What's happening there? Is that also a strategic project? And where is it sitting? Because I understand the city has invested quite a lot in infrastructure there, like it has done with the West Town in the west of the city.
We're still having engagements. You, I think, recall that was a partnership between the city and the other private sector parties. It was disturbed by COVID from a marketability point of view in terms of some of the developments that should have came there. But we're still engaging with the partners to that development, being the Waterfront Company, in terms of taking over, or perhaps maybe even looking at releasing some of those developments to the market to come in and develop. But those discussions are ongoing. Obviously, we're an organ of state, and we at times are not able to move at the speed at which the private sector players would move.
So UAM, I believe, are they still committed to that project?
We can't commit because those discussions are still ongoing. There are some aspects, I think, from our side as the city, the promenade was extended as part of unlocking those development opportunities, and I think that process has been completed. There have been, I think, some discussions. There were some changes, I think, with regards to even some board compositions that we had to discuss with them, but those discussions are ongoing. We are just trying to make sure that before we pronounce, we've actually finalized everything else and we are in agreement with everything else in terms of what should be coming up on that side and actually communicate to the market with clear timeframes like we've been trying to do with some of the property transactions that we've been doing as the city.
Okay, thanks for that insight. I know I caught you a bit off guard there, but you talked about audits of the city and that sort of thing. There has been a tremendous amount of negative impacts on the city in recent years, the worst floods in almost 100 years. But is eThekwini investment friendly? How is the city supporting and attracting private sector particularly real estate investment into the metro?
From our city side, in terms of our own property portfolio, like I said, we do offer our own properties for development as well, with minimum lease period of about 30 years and the maximum period of about 45 years for your high value asset. I think for the hotels, we went up to 50 years simply because of the value of that property. And the kind of incentives that we then offer, that is, we do give rental relief to prospective investors during construction period up to a period of about 3 years. So when you've been awarded from our own municipal owned property, awarded a lease for that period, we would then defer your rental payment until such time that your construction is complete, up to a period of 3 years. For private sector players that own properties within our jurisdiction, we do have an incentive policy that we then use to then provide those incentives. And I think it is much more targeted at industrial, commercial, as well as your mixed-use development. We can consider residential provided it's a high rise. And it's those incentives basically must be for new investment. We'll consider the value of the investment, the number of jobs to be created, and the sector to be accommodated. And each of those three things I've mentioned would have its own rebate. And we then combine those to then give a rebate. If you meet all of them in certain instances, you can actually end up getting about probably up to 100% in terms of your raise rebate for a period of 3 years. And I think even with this specific process of the incentive policy, there are about 54 projects. Some of them I've mentioned that have benefited out of that incentive policy.
You're not going to put the names out there, but I'm aware of a few of them. One of them is Investec and Brickworks in particular there, because was virtually a greenfield site that's been unlocked. So you're going to only charge those industrial rates once each area is developed there with the different warehouses. The latest that we reported on is Amazon opening a warehouse there in July. And I know I attended an event there a month or two ago. So it's worth watching. Thanks for all your insight from that perspective. Do you want to share some of the challenges for the Metro in terms of the property sector and unlocking development? I know you specifically head of real estate, but, I did ask the Tshwane Mailer last week about, issues around, payment of rates, illegal connections. It's quite a challenge running a big metro.
It is quite a challenge, and I think we are no different from any other municipality. So the challenges that Tshwane is facing with regards to illegal connections would face those. But I think too, the state of the economy is not what it is where it should be. And by implication, that would have an impact on your collection rates. We've nonetheless have kept our collection rate very steady at between 90 and 93%. The target is always to get 95%. And I think compared to other metros, Tshwane and Joburg specifically, we're doing quite well, because at least our collection rate, despite all these challenges, is sitting at about 90 to 93%. The intention is to always get it at 95, but with all of these challenges, we've always kept a very good collection rate at about 90% and not below that. If there have been instances where we've probably not met that target, but it was not as bad as it looks. If we were to then compare the other municipalities in terms of the collection rate. Like I said, the state of the economy is what it is. People are under pressure from an income point of view. The level of expenditure is rising quite high due to inflation, but the salaries are not increasing at the same rate. And I think that is bound to hit people in the pocket. And some of the things they would then compromise is perhaps maybe not paying for services. We do offer our debt relief programs. I think for this financial year, there's one that is closing, which I think is the second or the third we've offered this year, just to try and relieve consumers that are in areas to come forward and encourage them to come forward and enter into payment arrangement. And I think that is why our collection rate is sitting at about 90 plus, because we do offer incentives where we even write off a certain portion of the interest as well as some of the capital debts if you then enter into those payment arrangements. And I think that is working. Hence, our collection rate is sitting at about 90% plus.
This is a question I didn't really plan to ask, but, each city is unique. It goes without saying some of the water challenges in eThekwini. But from a supply to property developers, how is the city dealing with the whole water issue? Because a lot of infrastructure was damaged during the floods about 2 years ago. And, it's quite a topical issue. I think Carte Blanche had a big expose last week, which didn't portray the city in a very good light. But developments are still underway, as you mentioned.
We do have challenges, but I think we're dealing with them. And I think if you listen to the State of the City address, as well as the budget statement when the budget was passed, there are clear programs. And those programs are substantiated and backed up by budget that has been made available to deal with some of the water issues. I think water is probably amongst the top three in terms of capital expenditure allocation. And that is a testament to the city's commitment to try and fix the water infrastructure and make sure that at least we go back to normality where we do not have and experience some of the disruptions that we've been experiencing in the past. So from challenges, we do have a plan? Yes. And that plan is clearly articulated in our budget, which we should be implementing. Some are currently underway in terms of upgrading some of the water treatment works. And I think the mayor has launched some of them, which we should be completed. Obviously, those are not things that you can do in a short term. Those are time-consuming construction projects, and they would take a bit of time before those construction are complete and we are able to then resolve some of the water issues. But like I'm indicating, I think from a budget point of view and a resource point of view, we have allocated resources to try and deal with some of our water challenges.
Thanks for that. I don't want to go into detail because you're not the head of water or infrastructure on that side. So I appreciate you taking the question on the chin there and responding. But spiraling rates and taxes and linked to service delivery are often raised as major concerns by property developers, listed REITs, and industry associations like SAPOA, which generally has quite a good relationships with some of the big metros, even though they might disagree at times. Please, can you give us some insight into, commercial rates in the city? Is Durban's commercial rates competitive? I know you talked about incentives, but SAPOA has complained about things like development levies and, the spiraling cost of rates, not just in Durban, but in Johannesburg and other cities in South Africa.
Look, I've seen some media articles relating to the comparison of tariffs. And I think for me, we are comparing apples with pears. And I'll give you context because part of what I do as well is to look after the valuation role. And I'll give you numbers just so that you can get a bit of context in terms of where we're coming from. Number one, eThekwini is 32% urban and 68% rural. And by implication, your rates are levied on properties that would have title deeds. Now, within the eThekwini context, it's only 32% of the entire eThekwini geographic location. We have 561,000 properties. Now, I will give you the stats with regards to Cape Town, Joburg, Tshwane, and Ekurhuleni. The biggest municipality in the country is City of Joburg. They have 934,562 properties with a total value of 1.5 trillion. They are followed by Cape Town at number 2 with 909,000 properties with a total combined value of 1.7 trillion. They are followed by Ekurhuleni, which has 773 properties with a total value of 744 million. They then followed by Tshwane at just over 700,000 properties with a total value of 688 million. We as eThekwini at number 5 with 561,390. Now, just from an economic scale point of view, you will then start seeing the difference in terms of what we as eThekwini have to deal with compared to other metros. Like I said, we are 68. The reason for that, why we have such a low base, is because we are 68% rural, meaning that 68% of properties within eThekwini are located in rural areas, largely in Ngonyama Trust and your villages and all of that. And only 32%, hence the low number. But if you look at it from a population point of view, we have the third largest population after City of Cape Town and Joburg, around about almost 4 million. Joburg being the biggest at about 5 million and Cape Town below them at about 4 million. So And we all have to provide basic services to these ones. Now, let me come then to your question relating to commercial tariffs. Again, I'll use valuation roll information just as a basis for that. We have 20,200 property business and commercial, or properties that are categorized as business and commercial. Cape Town has 39,363. We have 8,576 properties that are categorized as industrial. Cape Town has 13,000, just over 13,026. So from both a number of properties point of view, which then dictates the pool you are levying, as well as a value point of view, they are higher than us. And then lastly, the highest value for a residential property within eThekwini is 27 million. In Cape Town, that is 10 times the highest value we have. Now, if we were to apply the same tariffs, you don't need to be a mathematician to then see that we are not going to get the same rates because, one, they have a larger pool of properties to rate. Two, they have a higher average value than us as eThekwini. We have the third highest average value in compared to the other 5 metros. Cape Town, again, being number one at about 1.8 million, followed by City of Joburg at about 1.6 million, and then us at about 1.241. And before we then go to the issue of even rating, you then have to factor in that the average values I've indicated are inclusive of the rate, the rebate value, which I think in our municipal context is about 120. Even if you can only levy somebody after you've actually taken off that rebate in terms of the value. And I think here we are sitting at about 120. Now, when you then compare again to the metros in terms of the number of properties they have to rate, compare with the average value, they still have to then rate. Surely, if we were to apply the same rate, we'd still come worse off as eThekwini, but from a constitutional obligation point of view, we all have to comply and provide services to our citizens on an equal footing. So I think for me, the comparison in terms of other metros, in terms of rates and taxes and the tariffs we are charging, is a little bit unfair without taking into account the figures I've given in terms of the number of properties that each municipality have. And I've given reasons as to why us at eThekwini we are sitting with such a low base, and two, the average value. If all of us were to apply the same rate in terms of 1 cent, we would still come off worse off simply because of the number of properties we are going to have to rate, as well as the value then we are using to rate. And these are some of the things that there's little you can do about them, specifically the average value within your municipal jurisdiction, because it talks to the property market within your jurisdiction. And I think, two, the number of properties you would have, that is highly linked to how formal your municipal jurisdiction is. And to be honest, Joburg and Cape Town are leading. They are sitting around about 95 plus in terms of properties that are sitting in formalized townships where they have title deed and they are able to rate those. So for me, if you look at it from that point of view, you then would have a completely different argument and a completely different debate, because from a purely economic scale point of view, we can't be doing those comparisons. But nonetheless, I did say that we do have an incentive policy that is actually cushioning developers in terms of then making sure that at least we still remain an attractive investment destination.
Thanks for that. It was quite a lot of detail there, but essentially it is a case of maybe a higher burden, as it were, to some of the commercial property players. But I would think as the economy grows and once things comes right in terms of not just economic growth, but boosting property values and that sort of thing, the city will leverage off that, and new developments such as West Town and others. We a bit over time. Before you go, Thapelo, urban renewal is a big issue for major cities. How important is the Durban CBD and urban renewal in that traditional CBD for you as the head of real estate? What is being done on that front? You talked about Centrum site, but sometimes, Durban is, commented on after Johannesburg about, what's happening. It's a very vibrant city. Some of the big retailers have quite a big presence in the city still, especially during the day. But just to get some insights on some of the city or municipalities' urban renewal plans, vacancy rates in the CBD is quite high compared to other parts of the country in Durban.
I'll answer it in twofold, and I think also deal with the issue of the vacancies. But we have what we call the inner city regeneration work streams that is chaired by the city manager. And that meeting sits every Monday from 4 p.m. up until 8 o'clock in the evening. It has about 16, between 14 and 16 work streams. And all of those work streams are concentrating on specific streams that are focused at rejuvenating the inner city. It is quite important, and I think that is the reasons why we have those kind of streams, and we sit on a weekly basis to look at the plans, the implementation of those plans, and how far is it, and what are the challenges. But from a property perspective, from terms of the properties we own as the city, we've taken those properties out to the market. I've mentioned Central as being one of them, but some of the so-called bad buildings that we have as the city, we're taking those to the market. Unfortunately, we did not get any concrete responses. I think one will be running, but there are others where we have earmarked them for social housing, and we've undertaken a process to then decant the people that are actually living in those properties because they are in a bad condition, and we do have social housing project that we need to implement as the city. There is a process currently underway, which I'm hoping by June we should have finalized it by end of June. That is, we should have finalized that process to then move those people so that those projects can start. So in terms of the properties we are owning, we've led by example and released those to the market for them to come in and redevelop. There are two properties that we've acquired that we've actually negotiated with province to transfer to us that are also categorized as so-called bad buildings, which we're in a process of taking transfer. And I think once we take transfer, we'll then follow the same process. But the unfortunate part of it is that these properties are illegally occupied, and we then have to make plans around relocating those people. So from us, in terms of the properties that we own that are not really in good condition, those processes are currently underway. Like I said, we've advertised, I think, two of them. If you add Centrum, I'm not going to say it's a bit, but it's one of the properties we could use to redevelop and rejuvenate the inner city. That is currently out on an expression of interest. We do have town talks where we are communicating some of our plans. I'm not sure if we've been privy to. I think so far we've held about 2. Tomorrow we are meeting with the Institute of Architects as part of the stakeholders, as part of, again, that inner city regeneration program, where we'll then be articulating and making our plans and our intentions known in terms of implementing that. And I think in the last month, if you've been driving around the city, I'm not going to talk about last week because there was tourism in Indaba, but there is some improvement in terms of the upkeep, including some of the bylaw enforcement that we've been doing together with our colleagues from Business Support and Metropolis. I think we've released quite a number of press releases relating to some of the stores that were closed and some of the informal traders that should have not happened, but those people had to be removed because they were there. In terms of vacancies, it's the implications of COVID, really. I'll speak specifically in terms of office space. That's one. And I think perhaps maybe the rate of recovery was not at the rate at which it would have been. The crime issues, obviously they are there, but like I said, I think we are dealing with it as part of the inner city regeneration program. There is a specific work stream that deals with the crime issues there, and I think the reporting that we get on a weekly basis look encouraging in terms of dealing with some of the crime issues. In terms of then the vacancies, I think there is a lot. If you compare us again, I'm always going to make that comparison to Joburg and Cape Town. We're probably lagging behind Cape Town in terms of reduction, in terms of number of vacancies. Call centers are moving back to the CBD. If you look at what happened, I think they are moving back from Umhlanga into the CBD. I know the Nedbank building next to ICC, that building is 80% occupied by call centers. Just across the road from as you enter the CBD, at where Green Road used to be, again, those offices were empty about 18 months ago, and now they are full, and a large part of that space was taken by call centers. So from where we're seeing, there is some reduction of those vacancies, driven largely by call centers that are now moving back into the CBD. I'm based at Embassy, and I know that some of the, I think 2 or 3 floors of this specific building is also taken up by call centers. And when you look at where those vacancies were, just after COVID and where they are today, there is some sort of improvement. Obviously, it's not spreading to some other areas, but from looking at those numbers, it does look encouraging that those vacancies are reducing. And I think then lastly, the two biggest blend owners within the CBD with regards to both offices and retail, one is a listed fund and the other one is the one that is based here. I'm not going to mention by name because I'm not trying to promote them. But if you look at the one that is REIT,
the share price will be included in this transcript when it goes up.
if you look at that one, I think their vacancies is largely driven by the fact that their main tenant is government. And with austerity measures being applied on the budget, there has not really been that much uptake purely from government in terms of procuring new offices or even expanding the kind of offices simply because of there is not enough money for both national and provincial government to be moving around and actually expanding some of their service delivery offerings. Even with us as well, we do go out to the market quite a lot. We are leasing around about 40,000 square meters. We've been advertising probably in the last 18 months, almost close to 20. And in most instances, what we then find, and that is again the other reasons why you have such vacancies, is that some of these buildings are not in conditions that is satisfactory in terms of occupational health and safety. And that also then plays a role in terms of them being reducing those vacancies. We've seen drips and drabs of some of them where owners have actually invested and made sure that they are compliant and they are then able to attract people into those buildings.
Thapelo, it's been a much longer pod than I anticipated. We won't transcribe the whole thing, but thank you so much for your time. That was Thapelo Mmusinyane, Head of Real Estate at eThekwini's Municipality in Durban.
Thanks for listening to the Moneyweb Property Pod with Suren Naidu. To listen to more episodes, go to moneyweb.co.za or the Moneyweb app and follow Moneyweb News for daily updates. Follow Suren on Twitter @Suren Naidu for more of his property industry content and other business stories. The Property Pod.